Okay, my name is Claire Grunwald now, nee Berkowitz. I was born in Debrecen, Hungary, and when the Germans took over Debrecen, I was about 12 years old. I finished 6 elementary grades in Hungary before we were taken away. We were 5 sisters that survived. We had a 6th that was a year younger than me, Goldie, and after my father was taken away in a work camp.
How did that happen? They just one
Well,
day?
you know, they took all the men.
Right.
Took all the men in a work camp that was like an army.
What year was that?
It was, let's see, it must have been already in the early 40s.
Okay.
You
They
know.
just showed up and took them away? That's it?
No. It was, they were drafted, like in the army. Only they were like the army, only second class army. They were ditch diggers. They worked, you know, it was a labor camp, just for the men.
Not voluntary?
Absolutely not, absolutely not. So he was taken away and my mother was left with 6 of us, and then Goldie, we had a very wealthy relative in Rosenborg, because my mother comes originally from Transylvania, and these people had no children, and she was a year younger than I, and they begged her to let her go to school over there, and they'll take care of her. Meanwhile, the Germans came in and they wouldn't let her come back. And we hired a Jew could not travel anymore on the subway, on the trains, on the railroads. And we hired a Goethe. We took all the papers. It took out all our money, whatever we could, to get the child back. And the Goethe that we trusted with all the money and all the papers went and met her lover someplace and came back empty-handed as far as we're concerned. And then we heard later that that transport went straight to the ovens without being selected. So my mother lost a child, I lost a sister. So the 5 of us, we were home, and of course they took away the license to do business from the Jews at that time already, after the Germans came in. And it didn't happen overnight, it didn't happen all at once. Slowly, once the license were taken away, a Jew was not allowed to hire a guy. You know, we always had a maid, and then we couldn't have a maid. Then, that's how it went, step by step. And we had to make a living somehow. So my mother thought that, okay, let's make sure that the children have always what to eat. So she sort of opened up a butcher store in her kitchen. We went shopping to the market. We bought the geese and the ducks and chickens. And by the way, in Hungary, it was forbidden to slaughter beef. So I never even saw beef till after the war.
Why did they do that?
Why?
Just
They didn't allow, it wasn't allowed to share kosher.
cruelty to animals, that type of thing?
No, they were not afraid of that.
Oh.
Cruelty to Jews.
Oh.
Absolutely not.
In other words, if a guy wanted to eat fine.
Oh yes, the Goyim had everything. No, we were. I never saw beef till after the war.
So shchita was outlawed. That was a special thing for Jews.
Right.
Yeah.
Shchita was outlawed. So we used to buy the chickens and such at the market. Then we children would take it to the Shechstibo, which is the slaughterhouse. My grandfather, Rav Sholem, Rav Shia Gutman, my mother's father, was a shaykhed when he was younger. He was very old already, so he was only there to supervise. And I always went to the Sheikh Steve sometimes to play with my grandfather and or to get a penny from him, and you know. And so we used to go and take it to the Sheikh Steve, and we would have it slaughtered, and then we would pay a nickel or something to have it defeathered. And then my mother would kasher it. My sister Brian Dole Sholem, she was the biggest help to my mother. She always helped her kasher. They stayed up till 4 in the morning. Then she made schmaltz out of the fat of the goose, and then we would sell the schmaltz, and we would sell, and my mother made a good living, and we always had meat on the table. I'm not saying that we had, prime, but we had the frigelach, the keppelach, the fisselach, and
all the extremities.
Yes. And if you ever want to taste good stuff, taste the legs of the geese or the ducks. That's the best. And then we used to make stopgans. We would stuff the geese. Today you're not allowed to do it here in the United States because it's cruelty to animals.
Right.
But
foie gras, has a special name.
Oh yeah, and
Right.
and it would have the most gorgeous, delicious liver. Of course, we sold that for big bucks. So that's how we made our living. And as long as the people, the goyim didn't find out, we could make a living. So that's how, and it got worse and worse. Then as far as we lived right next door to the school. And I would get out of bed when I heard the bell ring, and that meant that we had to be in the schoolroom already, but okay, I wasn't exactly the most punctual person.
Right.
And then we had to leave our school because the army took it over. And they took away whatever they could from the Jews, piece by piece, slowly. And then the time came when they closed the ghetto. They made streets and they put a fence around it, and they said, this is where you Jews will live. And all the other Jews that were outside the ghetto, they had to move in with relatives, with whoever they could. We were, of course, my family, the 5 of us. We lived in comfort, not like that was considered a comfort in Debrecen. We had 4 rooms, with 2 bedrooms, a big dining room, and a kitchen. And and there we would sleep 2 children in 1 bed. It wasn't because there were the 6 of us. And it wasn't like here, oh my goodness, thank God what we have here, Baruch Hashem. But we didn't have this kind of luxury, even though we were middle class, we were not poor. But this is what it was. Then my cousin, the Jacobs, do you remember, do you know my cousin Archie?
Yeah.
There were 9 children and they moved in on us. They had to.
Wow.
So,
They had no choice.
They had no choice, and we had no choice. But we didn't fight. We were very good friends, What can I tell you? There were no maids, so we all had to do our cleaning and everything ourselves. And if I'm telling you, a maid was a necessity. in Europe because there were no vacuum cleaners, there were no washing machines, and like for Pesach we would take out the rugs in the yard and beat them physically. That's why people didn't have to worry about gaining weight.
At work all the time. Right.
Much.
So there wasn't too much packaged foods then either.
No.
Okay.
And sugar was very expensive, and not everybody could afford. You know, to be Bishvat, we would get one orange for the whole family, and we had some almonds, which was also very expensive because whatever didn't grow in Hungary was very expensive. We had some figs and how do you call it?
Dates?
Dates. Dates, and that was our. Of course, what do you call it?
Boxer.
Boxer.
St. John's bread.
And Boxer. So that's what we had for. Over here, Kanahara, we have at least 15 minimum we count, and after that we don't count.
Right.
But at home, even in the good old days, that's all we had. Hanukkah, in the wartime, we had to cover our windows. If Chas v'sholem, a tiny bit of light peeked out, then they would come and arrest you. So of course the Hanukkah lights were not put in front of the windows like it's here.
Right.
We were happy that we were heavily curtained, and when the doors were open we had to make sure that it shouldn't show because they were very quick to accuse Jews of being spies. So we were very careful.
So it was against the law to light Hanukkah candles too?
It was against the law to show the light.
Wow.
We couldn't show, definitely not. And we did not hear about Auschwitz. We did not. We heard that they're taking us away in work camps, in working camps. So even though people came from the mountains, from north, they came from the Maramoros, and they told us, they warned us, run, you don't know what's coming. And we didn't believe them. We were snobs, and they were much poorer than we were. It was a different world. They came from villages, and we were sophisticated. We had schooling. We were reading books and everything. We were different. And when they came, they were. At first, we were trying to be kind. You know, when the Maramoros was liberated from the Czechoslovakians, because Hungary was first, after World War I, they took away part of the north, part of the west, and part of the south.
Right.
And so it was cut into tiny little bit. Hungary, the real Hungary was not bigger than New York State. And Debrecen was sort of in the middle. And when these people came from Maramoros, we didn't believe them. We said, oh, they only want sympathy because they want us to feel sorry for them and help them out. And they said they didn't speak, their Hungarian wasn't so good either, so we laughed at them. And we said, oh, those people don't even know how to speak Hungarian. The Hungarians didn't speak any other language. And So I remember her name was Sima. She gave away one child, she gave away to a guy, and another child I think she lost in Auschwitz. And she came and she told the story that they ran away because they were killing people one after another. And she was able to run here and save herself. Then she found her husband, who also ran away, and he was telling this horrible story. I heard it with my own ears. That they took the village Jews and they told them to dig a big hole. And then they stood them around and started shooting. And they fell into the graves that they dug themselves. And this man, he saw what's going on and he jumped in. He fell in, made believe he got shot, and he made believe he fell in. He fell in. And after about 24 hours, when all was quiet, at night he started creeping out from in between the bodies. And all of a sudden he hears a little voice, Tate, nimm mich mit.
Father, take me along. Yeah.
And he found his little 7-year-old boy clinging to him. And he said, okay, I'll take you with me. But if you say one word, both our lives are lost, and I'm going to kill you myself with my own hands. And the boy was clung to him on his back, and he was quietly, and they both got saved. They came to Debrecen, and they survived. I met them after the war.
Wow.
Yeah. That's one of the stories.
But when you heard this story, you didn't believe it.
No, we did not believe it because we couldn't believe that the Hungarian Goyim, even though they weren't kind to us especially, but they were our neighbors, we couldn't believe that the Hungarians could be so cruel, but they were cruel.
It just was too much to think that they could do that. After all, everything was civilized.
Yeah, we thought
The world was civilized. How could they do that?
We couldn't believe that. We were reading Shakespeare and whatever not. There were no television, thank God. So I was reading day and night Hungarian.
Right. But in your wildest imagination, you could not think that, how could they do that? They're civilized people.
No.
Civilized people can't do that, right? Wow. So, when did you start realizing that something is really wrong?
I was a child, and my head was in the clouds always. I wasn't a down-to-earth child like my sister, who was only a year and a half older than me, Brindu. And she worked alongside with mother, just like any grown-up.
Right.
I mean, she was 13 and a half, and she worked just as hard as my mother. But my heads were in the books, and I did what my mother told me, resentfully, but I did. Then the day came when after we were a while in the ghetto. I don't remember exactly what date and what, because even today I'm not good with dates.
Right.
And that we were told that they're taking us to the brick factory, and we should take whatever we can carry, because that's all we're gonna keep. So my mother packed whatever she could. I remember I carried a rucksack and two bags in my hand, and even in my teeth I carried something.
Wow.
And we went. I don't even remember now that I'm thinking back, I don't remember whether we walked there or whether we were taken there. I don't, because it was on the outskirts of the
Of the town.
of the town. And all I remember is that there were wooden floors and no beds. And I remember at Hayom how hard it was to sleep there. That's what I remember. I'm sorry, I was a
Well, that's
child.
okay. We're just looking for the way you remember it. I'm not
Yes.
looking to make up a story. Yeah, yeah.
And we were there for 2 weeks before they moved us on. And this is something I'd like to say. There were a lot of Jews, Hungarian Jews, that were not religious anymore, that were
Assimilated.
assimilated. Yeah. You have to help me out. Sometimes I forget words.
Right.
You know my age. And many of the assimilated Jews in those 2 weeks committed suicide. I walked the roads during the day, back and forth, and I saw many people dead or dying. They took their own lives.
That took their own life. Like they couldn't handle being treated like that.
Right, right. If you don't have the batochen, if you don't believe in Hashem, it's very hard to face those kind of things. Now, they made separate transports from Debrecen, separated people, and I remember they said one transport should go only grown-ups with less than 3 children, and another transport with old people and more than 3 children. So we were 5 children, and my Aunt Helen, my mother's only sister, she had 7 children. The youngest was Javi, who was 3 years old. My youngest sister, Vera, was 5 years old.
Right.
Yes, and there we were, and we were put into the transport with more children and older people because my grandparents were there.
Right.
And Helen said to Mommy, she said, Rose, let's sneak over to the other transport because probably they go to a much better place than where there are more children. And my mother said, you know what, wherever Hashem puts me, that's where I'm going. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not leaving my parents, I'm staying. The other transport went straight to the ovens.
Wow.
We were saved by Kastner, actually. I have a book.
Right.
I just found out recently
Right.
that we were saved by Kastner.
Okay.
Yeah.
Somebody negotiated. In other words,
Negotiated.
he negotiated that you shouldn't go to the
Kastner.
ovens.
Yes. That,
Yes.
that for work, I don't know, for this and that. It was towards the end of the war already, and Hitler didn't want another Krakow, where the Jews...
Warsaw
Warsaw.
ghetto. Yeah.
They didn't want another Warsaw, so he negotiated with Eichler first for the first 3,000 people that went to Israel, and my late brother-in-law, this his husband, went with that transport to Switzerland, and that's how they were saved.
Well, where did your transport go to?
We went to Strasshof. We went through the same things that the people did in Auschwitz. We walked around naked for a whole day. And, but there were no ovens. They deloused us, they shaved some of us, they did everything, and then they gave us back our poor junk, whatever we could carry on our backs. So we really had a few blankets.
Right.
And this and that. Our train, we were put on the train, and our train was going to Auschwitz. And we were on that train for 5 whole days, 80 people in one train, without food or drink.
In one car,
In one car,
without food or water.
without food or water,
Wow.
for 5 days.
And the people were fainting. I mean, how some of them couldn't
You know
take
what?
it, I'm sure.
I wouldn't know because I was lucky, because I was we were on the corner, and there was a little window on the top, and all the way I remember I was standing on top of the packages and looking out the window. And that was the first time in my life I saw hills, because Debrecen is very flat. You know, it's the whole Hungary almost, there are no mountains.
But did you know something very bad was happening?
No,
See, it was just an
I
adventure.
know, I mean, listen, everybody was collapsing and crying, but I just didn't want to hear that.
Right.
I was just standing up and looking out the window.
There's a certain defense that a person has that they don't want to realize the worst even when it's happening.
How, you know, first of all,
And your child.
we did not believe that they are taking us to a gas chamber. We did not, because in Debrecen, the main rabbi, Rabbi Weiss, said, "Don't worry, people. You're gonna work hard. You'll be treated well." And we were gonna go to work.
I'm sure Rabbi Weiss believed that when he said it, but
Whatever,
he didn't
whatever.
know. Yeah.
So I was just standing there for 5 days. I don't remember falling asleep, but I remember the most beautiful sunrises and sunsets in my life. That's what I remember from the trip. Then we got to Strasshof, and there we were processed again, you know. But we did go to work camps. We did go to work camps, and first we went to. They took 3 big families. My first cousins, you know, the Zilders, and Helen, Amy, and my mother. And there was another family. It was what was it? It doesn't matter. A big family with 8 children. And we ended up first. Farmer needed to pick peas, so we went to pick peas. We slept in a glass house where they you know, grew.
Oh, a greenhouse.
A greenhouse.
A greenhouse. Yeah.
Greenhouse that was made of glass.
Right. Because I had to let the sun in. Sort of
Right.
Right.
So we slept there, the 3 of us, and then we went. From there, they took us to Mosbierbaum. Mosbierbaum was an oil refinery factory. And when we got there, it was 3 big floors, you know, big rooms, tremendous, and it was laid out with beds. So we saw that probably other people will be coming, but we were the first. So we took the 3 corners. And after that, they brought in a whole transport of Jews from middle of Hungary, where most of them were not religious at all.
Right.
And these people hated us like you have no idea. We suffered from them more, almost, than from the Germans.
They hated you just because you were religious? That's it?
For both.
They were still thinking that
yes.
you're worse than them,
Yes,
even though they were in the same boat.
Yes, some of them were even Megayer, some of them were
Converted. Didn't
And
help them, though.
Didn't help them. And they were more than we were, of course. So therefore, they had the JUPO, Jüdische Polizei, you know, and they were in the kitchen, and So they made sure that when they gave us the food, that there was no meat swimming in there, you know. They were unbelievably vicious to us. And my poor mother had to fight for every bite for us. We stayed in Mosbillbone a few months, and then they took the whole transport.
During this time you were working?
Yes, I was working.
What kind of work?
Well, me and a few kids took the food to the workers where they worked outside, you know, they worked, they said that they're building the airfields.
Right.
So there were these couple of Jews pushing around the dust, what a tractor could have done in 5 minutes. We worked a couple of months on that.
Right.
So, but we were there, and they left in the morning, and they came back at night. So, so there were about 5 or 6 of us who used to take out the food for them.
Right.
And
So
yeah, that's what we did. We went, you know, before the winter, I used to go with a cart and then on a sled, and we brought it out to them, the food. And and after that, they took us all to Strasshof, but not in the Durchgangslager. Durchgangs means transient. We
Right.
didn't go. There was another lager. A lager is a camp.
Right.
Another lager in the middle of the forest. We were surrounded by big forests. And there we met a lot more people from Debrecen, families like us.
Right.
So our lot was a little bit better because, you know, when you're among your own, I mean, here we were with just the 3 families, and they called us the Polish Jews because, you know, the Polish Jews were more, I don't know, were different than us, I think.
Right.
They called us the Polish Jews.
But you were different than them, so they called you the Polish
Yeah,
Jew.
so we were the
Right.
we were the Polish Jews. It was terrible. And then in Strasshof, wait a minute, wait, I mixed myself up. In Strasshof we did the airfield. In
Right.
Mosbillbone, in Mosbillbone it was different. It was oil refinery, and some people worked in some places else, but we, being that we did already work for a gardener, my family, the 3 of us worked for a gardener.
Right.
So at least we could sometimes chip here and there something, you know, and also
That grew.
a little bit, not that we had too much.
Right.
And I remember I turned 12 before Thomas Esther, and I fasted the first time. And and just that day we worked at a special farm, and the farmer was very nice to us, and he gave us butter and potatoes, and I didn't eat, and I regretted it later. God forgive me. But at Hayom I can't forgive myself.
Well, you were starving. That's what
I
happened.
was starving, but I went and I fasted on Esther time. Was my first fast.
Right.
And there was food and I couldn't, and you know, you couldn't take home anything because they touched you up and made sure that, you know, you're not putting things in your pants.
Right. Oh,
You
boy.
know, yeah. So I fasted. The first fast was Esther Thomas. And when it came to Yom Kippur, this was in Mosbillbone. We were still in Mosbillbone on Yom Kippur. And there was a doctor from Zagreb. Zagreb was, very, was emancipated, very unreligious.
Right. They were the modern guys.
Modern,
Not modern, they're completely unreligious. Yeah.
And he said, not one Polish Jew is going to stay home today. They're all going to go out and work on Yom Kippur. And we all went out to work.
Yeah, no choice.
They had no choice, because whatever the doctor could say to the German people whatever they wanted, and they listened.
Right.
And there were a couple of nice Jewish girls who were the cleaning ladies for a couple of German officers. And they looked so good because they had enough food and they had everything.
Right.
So, so they lived a good life there, But we we suffered the most. And my grandfather, Ole Sholem, he was well in his 80s, because my mother was born 18 years after they were married.
Right.
And so he was pretty old by the time
He was with you still at this time?
Yes, he was.
Wow, yeah.
Yes, he was. He was walking with his Talis Bible. And in his Talis Bible he carried his halev, what you cut the neck of the...
The challah knife. Oh, chalev, as a shechet.
As a shechet.
Right.
Yeah. So he didn't have the strength to do anything else. He was really old. But he was there with us. Excuse me. And then when we were taken to Strasshof, in Strasshof we were working on the field, because we were in the middle of a forest. And the thing is, we had the barracks were built were prefabs.
Right.
Made out of very thin something, and there were 3 tiers of beds inside. And we had, because I think there was room for 12 people or something, so we needed, we were there with my grandparents and 5, 6, so we were 8, and there were 2 strangers, because I had to have the quota, and and there were 2 strange men, because later on they brought a whole regiment of the work camps, the men.
Right.
They brought a whole bunch of men. Without the families never burned in Auschwitz, and they were with us,
right.
A whole bunch of them. And so we were given 2 guys, and we had a little stove there, and we had to feed it ourselves. Now, how did we do that? I don't know from where, but we had a saw, and we used to step out. We were able to go out through the how do you call it, the fence.
Right.
And we would cut the trees ourselves.
And use it in the stone.
Yes,
Yeah.
and make a fire, and also we would pick mushrooms. For years after that, I couldn't eat mushrooms. And there was this fellow with us whose business used to be mushrooms, and he taught us which one was poison and which one wasn't.
So that's why you were able to eat mushrooms?
Yes, of course.
Right.
And we picked mushrooms, and we had, for the whole family, we had one tiny little bread, and my mother would cut it, and my poor little sister Hani had the smallest piece, because she was the smallest.
Right.
And she ate it slow, and I looked, excuse me, because she was the last one to finish.
Right.
And all I can remember is I was very hungry. I didn't have to worry about getting fat. No.
No need for Weight Watchers.
Yeah, no. And I remember there was a man, he snuck out where the officers lived, and there was very good dog food put out, and he stole the dog food.
Right. They were starving.
And one day we were going on the field, and we found a dead rabbit. And we skinned it and cooked it and ate it. It was so good.
You had no choice. You had to eat whatever
Yeah.
you could eat.
My grandmother and grandfather did not eat anything that wasn't kosher. I mean, they didn't eat, they did eat, but something that was really not kosher, they didn't eat.
They didn't
Like,
eat.
we had some vegetables, but mostly we were always hungry. Everybody was always hungry.
Well, you were in real starvation mode. I
Yeah.
mean, not to eat was death, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, it was. My father, Olaf Scholem, died because of that. My father, he was alone. He knew all that happened, and he was sure that we're not alive. And he didn't want to eat trife. And towards the end, I mean, he ate what he could eat. He didn't starve totally, but he didn't have any reserve.
Right.
So the last 2 weeks there was no food at all, and he died of starvation because he had
Because he had no reserve whatsoever.
Right.
Yeah.
And and we didn't know that he died. We didn't know. When we came back to Debrecen finally, but I'm jumping ahead. Is that all right?
Yeah, it's okay. But go ahead, go talk about that, and then we'll come back. Okay.
When we came back to Hungary, somebody told us that Yasso, that was my father's name, Olaf Scholem, Yasso is alive. So we ran back as fast as it was possible. Don't forget that it was just behind the lines, and there were no railroads, everything was bombed out. So, but we came back as fast as we could to Debrecen, and my father wasn't home. My uncle was home, and he fixed up a beautiful apartment for my aunt and her children, but my father wasn't home. So we thought maybe he'll come home with the next train. And my mother went to the station every single day, 2 or 3 times, when a new train arrived, maybe my father will be there. Then, Yom Kippur, she went to shul, and she was crying. So a woman goes up to her and she says, Mrs. Berkowitz, you know what it is? And my mother says, what do I know? She says that your Yasso is dead. And that's when she found out.
That's how she found out.
That's how she found out that he died. The whole Debrecen knew and didn't have the guts to tell us. And my mother was a very strong woman. She says, if Yosef isn't here, I'm leaving. And
Right.
she packed up whatever we had and we started leaving. So anyway, I was at.
Well, let's go back. You were in these work camps over there. And what?
Yeah, okay. And so that's how it was. There was water. Our camp was right next door to a Goyish cemetery, where there was also a church. And we could pump water from there. So we used to wash our clothes there. You know, we used to go in there. So I remember once one woman who was the word, and became Goy.
Became,
Yeah.
converted. Right.
Converted. One woman who converted said, "Oh, these filthy Jews, look what they do to this sacred place." And we were just laughing because she was the same as us in Hitler's eyes.
Right.
Yeah.
He didn't care for the conversion.
He
It
didn't
didn't mean
care.
anything to
No,
him. No. Wow. He was happy to kill her and torture her just as easily.
Didn't bother him at all.
Right.
Not at all. And I remember that. And then, so we were there, for a while. And we heard then, then they took us out from our regular camp and they took us back to the transient camp where we started to begin with.
Right.
And we were going to go to Theresienstadt. Theresienstadt was a place where a lot of people died. It was a horrible, horrible place. And we were put into wagons again. And there we were waiting for the train to start. And all of a sudden, the Russians came to bomb the whole station. Boom, 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 all over. And there we are sitting in the trains, and the trains is shuffling back and forth.
Right.
And you could see the hands of God, because there was this woman with us in the car, and she was holding her baby like this, covering it with her body, and then a shrapnel came in and hit the baby's head and died in her mother's arm.
Oh, right.
And then there's another thing. There was in all the cars, there were 60 to 80 people. There was one car where there was only 28 people. And again, my Aunt Helen, Rosie, let's go, sit in the other car, because we're going to be more comfortable. And my mother said, I'm not going anywhere. Where God puts me, I'm going to be fine. That car was the only car that got hit, and nobody survived.
Wow.
Amazing, isn't it?
That is amazing. She had faith to stay in the place, and
My mother said, no,
Yeah.
I'm not going wherever I'm staying. Hashem knows where to put me. And that's it.
that is very, very good. That's excellent.
And that car totally, it got a full hit on that one car. After that, we were led back to the camp. And then we were sort of left alone. One side were the Russians, the other side the Germans, and they were shooting across. So we were all hid in our barracks. Then it was quiet. So one of the Jewish guys go out and he sees a Russian soldier and he falls into his neck. Of course, he didn't speak a word of Russian, and those Russians were barbaric. And if you didn't speak their language, you were the enemy.
Right.
So they look at him, and he had a watch left over, but the Germans didn't take. And he said, the first word I learned in Russian is "Davai chasi," give me your watch. And they robbed him of his watch. And he came back screaming. And they tried to rape our women. And my God, it was unbelievable what sorrows we went through from the
Russians.
yes, they tore off the yellow stars, but that wasn't enough. If we didn't speak their language, we were the enemy.
Right.
And we had to go, and there was no transportation whatsoever. And we went. We found what do you call those little carriages that go in the Central Park with the horses?
Buggies.
Yeah.
Wagons, buggies.
A little buggy, whatever. And and we put all our leftover, whatever was leftovers from the Germans and the Russians. Oh, and I forgot to tell you how we survived as far as food is concerned. Before the Russians came yet, when we were left alone for a while, we ran out and see what's going on out there. Well, the whole railroad was filled with cars, and the cars for the Germans who were running away from the enemy, whatever, and they packed everything, whatever they had, into these cars. It was a lot more than what we took
Right.
when they took us away. And there was a whole big wagon, a whole big car that usually you carry, how do you call it, oil or milk in it, you know? And this was full with vodka. They stole it from Russia.
Right.
And sugar and beans and what excuse me, whatever you can imagine. You know, there was all kinds of foods and everything. So, but my mother was very careful. She didn't let us eat because our stomachs weren't used to it.
Right.
So she gave us very little from everything, and she was very careful. She rationed.
People died from eating too
People
much.
died,
So
yes.
it was normal. It was a good thing what she
Oh,
was
my
doing.
mother was very smart.
Right.
And so finally, after we found how nice the Russians were to us, we found that carriage, and my grandmother, who had a roise, you know what the roise is, like blood poisoning,
Right.
and
Shingles. It's called shingles.
No, it's not
It's not shingles. Something
no,
else.
it's when you have like a pimple on the bottom of your feet, and it has a red.
It spreads. It is a very very dangerous blood.
Yeah, and Honey, my youngest sister, had the mumps, and Javi was only 3 or 4 years old, so we put them on the carriage, and whatever packages we had, and we all pushed, and Zaidika was carrying his Taras Biter and walking next to us, and the most pushing was done by Tsiviu, and she was 17 already.
Right.
And Mommy and Helen Nini and the 3 older daughters, you know, Brindu and whatever. So I pushed also, but listen, how much, so we pushed, and Mommy had to keep an eye on Sibiu because Sibiu was very beautiful, and the Russian soldier wanted to take her.
Right.
And we started screaming, and a Russian officer came and shot the guy who wanted
The soldier.
the soldier. It was nothing, boom, boom, and finished.
Wow.
Then we came to in the evening, we were going to walk all the way to Bratislava, which is Maishi, what's Bratislava? Maishi.
He's asleep.
Yeah, he is. I
Okay.
think I'm putting you to sleep also.
No, I'm very fascinated. Go ahead.
And we found a house where probably workers used to sleep, you know. And in the back there was a tiny little room. And all of us, Helen, Nene, and us, went into that room and locked the doors and stayed in there nice and quiet. And there was a daughter and a mother who slept outside. There were double beds all over. Well, overnight we heard coilers. That woman was raped, at least 10 or 15 soldiers.
Oui.
And we were quiet. I mean, imagine, what's her name? Javi was only 4, and Hani was only 5 or 6, and they didn't save her.
Wow.
We closed all the lights. We were quiet like mice.
Right.
Yeah, and I'll never forget those questionings.
It was terrible. Yeah.
Terrible. Then we went on and we kept on asking, could you give us a right to, yeah, maybe it's, I don't know how you say it in English now, I forgot the name of,
The city?
Yeah, the main city from Czechoslovakia.
I don't know the name of the city. I
Yes.
can think about it.
Anyway, in Czechoslovakia, it's Bratislava.
Right.
And we kept on asking, could we get a ride to Bratislava? And finally, we got a ride on the back of a truck. All of us squirmed in and we came to Bratislava. A beautiful city, beautiful, and it wasn't bombed or anything. I don't know why, but it wasn't. And they took on Helen, Mamie, and Mommy as a cook.
Right.
And they went and cooked. And we had food, nice. We had it was a hotel. And we were staying there. And then somebody came from Debrecen and he said, "Oh, your men are home waiting for you." Well, my mother didn't need to hear more.
Right.
So we somehow, I don't remember how, but we went to Budapest.
Right.
And in Budapest, there was another guy from Debrecen, and he said, "Oh yeah, Mr. Zilber is home already." Yes, he's not home yet. I knew at that moment that he didn't survive.
Right.
I was the only one. I knew for sure he didn't survive.
Just
And
a feeling. It
just a
wasn't
feeling.
Something. Yeah.
I went out to cry and I knew he wasn't alive.
All right. Wow.
And that's what I remember.
So what happened when you left? When you left Debrecen after you found out that your father was not alive?
You know, we went through a lot. We went first, you know, we were in a DP camp. First of all, there were a lot of refugees. There were trains
Right.
that were running out, and I don't know who, somebody paid a lot of money for that, because we went first to Austria, and from Austria we went to Germany.
Right.
Of course, well, there was a little story. I have a little story besides that.
Right.
I wasn't easy to deal with. You know, you think your kids are difficult? I wasn't so easy. I was 13 years old, going on 14, and what can I tell you? Well, I was going to school there.
Right.
I was already pretty good in school. Before that, I wasn't that good. And my mother was talking about going to America, but I belonged to the Zionistic group. First, the Hanoar Hatzioni, and then to the more religious one, what do you call it?
Zionist?
No, Zionist, but you know,
Mizrahi.
Mizrahi.
Yeah.
The Mizrahi. And they were recruiting children, and I went. There was a camp. It used to belong to a very big nobleman with the most beautiful, how do you call it? And I only think of the Hungarian names,
Right.
palace
Oh, right.
and gardens and in an estate you never saw anything of the like. The walls were this thick because it was built in maybe 500-600 years ago, you know, when and it was the most gorgeous estate. And we were learning to be chalutzim and chalutzot.
Right.
Yes. And I didn't want to hear about going to America. I only wanted to go to Eretz Israel.
Right.
And then my mother wrote that we're going to Aliyah, meet us in Budapest. I mean, there was no regular mail. I don't know how she got it there, but I got word. And
Right.
there were no telephones, no cell phones.
No, nothing like that was even a dream by anyone.
And so I sold one of my blankets, and I got myself, again on the end of it, on the back of a truck, I got myself to Budapest. And Mommy wasn't there yet. So they had like special houses for different organizations. So I stayed with the B'nai Akiva, and I was staying there for a while, and I got ill. And I was taken to the hospital, and it was also some sort of a blood poisoning.
Right.
And that was before they had, how do you call it? Antibiotics. And they also didn't have, it was right after, it was around that Budapest. And they had no electricity, only a couple of hours every day, water only a couple of hours, very thin blankets. I didn't have enough because I sold my blanket. Very little food. And there I was alone. And then one nice day, I see a face at the door, dressed in a little fur hat with red cheeks and bringing food, brindu. She brought me tepet, griven and liver and bread and everything.
That's good food.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my God. And I said to myself, I don't care whatever happens, I'll never separate from my family again.
Well,
And that's how I ended up in America. We went to Germany, and
because they were taking care of you, they showed you to the family. Obviously, they showed up and they took care of you.
of
Yeah.
course, they had no intention to leave me alone. I went to Debrecen because they were there. I wasn't going to run away. If my mother would have insisted anyhow, even without being convinced, I wouldn't have gone by myself to Israel. But I was hoping that I could convince them to go to Israel.
Right.
And you know what?
They convinced you.
And I tell you what, I wish we could go now.
Well, maybe.
Yeah. So that's how I got. So then we were in Germany for 4 years in the DP camp,
Waiting to get a
a
visa.
visa to America.
Right.
And my mother couldn't see that I should do nothing,
Right.
while all my friends just had a good time and did nothing. And
Right.
I had to travel to Nuremberg every day to learn how to be a Scheidemacher.
Right.
It took me 3 years as an apprentice.
But
And
they taught you well. They taught
Oh
you.
yes, and that's why I'm the best.
Obviously,
woman.
you're running
Yes.
one of the best places now. So.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, I know how to make a scheidel from A to Z. From the blending of the hair to making the foundation to tying the hair into doing the... For 3 years I learned all about wigs and wig making.
They did it the old-fashioned way. No shortcuts.
Right. No shortcuts.
And it had to be perfect.
Yes,
So
yes.
unlike today where people knock things off and just slam it together.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's why, and I'm a perfectionist, and sometimes that's good and sometimes it's not good, but I
Well, for
can
a customer, it's very good.
I can't help myself anyway.
Right.
So that's where I learned to be, that's why I'm considered the best Schedelmacher. And it took me when I came to America in 49, I was 17 years old, and I had a job immediately by Madame Marie on Fifth Avenue. And I was working there for a while. Oops. So this is the story of Claire Grunwald and
That's
Claire
it.
Curie.
Well, you had 1920. When did you get married over here? 1951.
1951.
So 2 years after you.
Yes,
2
yes.
years after you got here. What was it like to see people who had come back from the war? I mean, at that time you realized what happened. And
When we came home to Budapest, and people looked at us and said, children and old people, where were you? That's when we realized about Auschwitz. We didn't know. We thought everybody had it like us. We thought we're going to go home, we'll meet our cousins, our families. You know, my father was one of 15 children, 15, and only 3 survived. One was Aunt Sarah, who came here to America before the war in 38.
Right.
One was Fete Pinchas, Adolf Hitler.
Right.
And one was Moshe, who was the youngest. My father was the 5th child,
Right.
and Moshe was the youngest, and Moshe married Brian Luke.
Right.
He was 12 years older than her, but never.
Yeah. But and then when you came back to the United States, you must have realized even more how many people died when.
No, and that was enough when I was home and I saw that there were no more Jews left in Hungary.
That must have been a shock to you. No, it wasn't.
Not to me. I see pink in everything. I wasn't. I know what happened. And Debrecen was all bombed up. It was terrible.
At that time, you knew already it was a disaster.
And yes, and a lot of my cousins, you know, my closest did survive because we only had the closest was the Zilbers, you know, my.
Right.
Yeah, and the other cousins, my father's brothers and sisters didn't live around us. And in Europe, in Debrecen, when you were a kid, and your uncle lived, so even I don't know how many miles, you never saw them. There was no telephone. I had Fete Pinchas, Olaf Schoram. Fete Pinchas had 7 children. I never met any of them. And he lived a couple of miles from Debrecen.
Right, but the transportation wasn't the same, so
Yeah,
it was
I
not.
never met them.
So what was it like when you came to America? You had to learn a whole new language and everything. No? You
Oh,
didn't know English.
I learned English before I came.
In the
So
DP camps already?
Yeah, in the DP camp. We knew that we were coming here and I learned.
So you did learn it?
Yes, so I didn't speak it as well as I speak it now.
Right.
But I understood. You couldn't sell. I remember walking down Delancey Street and this old toothless woman comes to me, speaking to me in Yiddish. Yiddish I didn't speak. And she said, and she asked me something. So I said, I'm sorry, I don't understand Yiddish. She says, oh, du bist a Grine? So I said, ja, ich bin a Grine. I was here 2 weeks. He says, sag nicht, ich bin auch einmal a Grine gewesen.
She was also green, okay.
Well, she didn't speak English. I did, but I didn't speak Yiddish.
Right.
I learned Yiddish from my husband.
Ah, okay. Very good. So what was life? What did you do when you got here? How did you survive? What happened?
What can I tell you? And Sarah, who was here since 38, said that if a girl doesn't get married here by the time she's 20, she's going to be an old maid.
That's very good.
So, yeah, I'm writing a book, it's all in there.
Right.
And they wanted me to marry whoever. And they tricked me into meeting boys that I really didn't care about.
Right.
And what can I tell you? And it's a story. And I was a rebel. And I wanted to fall in love like they do in the books and in the movies.
Right.
But it didn't work. So I said to my mother, okay, send the Shatchonem. And he was the second boy the Shatchem brought.
Right.
And and in 6 months we were married.
But it worked out pretty good.
Yeah, 61 years.
Right.
61 years together must have been good.
So it can't be too bad. It wasn't so bad.
No.
Okay.
Three daughters and Kanahara, grandchildren and great-grandchildren. So I'm not complaining. I think we did good. Hashem was kind to me with my whole life, for Hashem, because and my mother was the same way. My daughter Chaya asked my mother once, weren't you afraid for your life when you were in the concentration camp. And my mother said to her, I never ever thought that I'll be killed or anything. I knew I was going to survive. And that's how I am.
Interesting
I'm
way
a
to go.
survivor.
Right.
Even my business, when my business goes a little down or whatever.
But there are people, yeah, I'm just saying, so there are
Yeah.
people who thought they were going to die every minute.
No.
And they somehow or the other got through. You didn't even think that.
I didn't think, my mother didn't think, there was a whole bunch of people that was thinking like me, and we were fine. We kids were you know, I I remember the kids used to go and roll up dry leaves of walnuts.
Right.
And make cigarettes out of it. and in the quiet, and we would make believe we would smoke. You know, we would hide in a corner.
Right.
We would do what kids do. And we didn't think of death.
Right.
Only when it was bombing, when we were in Mosby bomb, that I was deathly afraid of the bombs and the how do you call it? was the bunker, the Jewish bunker was pretty far and we had to run there.
Right.
But thank God, but the funny thing was that, you know, there were other, how do you call it, Gefangene, how do you say?
Shelters?
No, what's a Gefangene?
Bomb shelters? No. Shelters. Captives, yes.
Yeah, other, there's another word for it already, and I can't find. Doesn't matter. So there were other people, you know, from Serbia, from Russia, you know, that were and the funny thing is that they knew when they're gonna bomb the factory.
Right.
They had a certain
Pipeline
sign.
for information.
Yes, and they told us when there was danger. They told us to run way
Right.
before the alarms went on.
So there must have been some kind of underground
There was
information
a
system.
very strong underground system there.
Yeah.
Yeah, between the Serbians and the they were talking. There's another word. I can't use it. That's my.
They knew what was
Yeah,
going
they
on. It
knew.
doesn't matter. They were informed.
Yeah,
Somehow or the other, there was some sort of a message system.
yeah.
Maybe they were the ones who were setting up the bombings and they knew when it was coming.
No, they weren't.
Yeah.
They didn't have that opportunity.
Ah,
They were very closely watched.
right.
They were working, but they were better off than we were.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So, but when you went through this, did this make you a stronger, a firmer person, a more
No.
believer in God through this whole thing?
No. I was exposed. I write this. I'm writing a book,
Right.
and I write this all in my book.
Right.
If ever I get it done. No, it wasn't. It was not good because I didn't have enough background, and that's. I don't know if you want me to say this or you want me to.
No, well, we can decide later.
They don't give enough. There's a lot of my contemporaries that are like that. We are only given from the top. We're not, my generation at least, I don't think has enough emunah to withstand certain winds.
Right. In other words, you weren't taught really to
No.
have Amunah as a child.
I was told God sees everything and you shouldn't do it or you'll burn in hell or whatever.
Right.
So either you believed it or not. And then I met these people who were not from and who had all kinds of ideas. And I heard them say that Moses was a very smart man. And he
Right.
went up and he wrote the Torah. That's why it took him 40 days.
Right.
And you
Pretty
know,
good for 40 days.
and I'm telling
Took me 2 years to write a book, and I'm not finished yet. But I'm almost finished. But
you know,
it was nothing but...
extremely intelligent, according to these people. So
Right.
now they gave me an answer to, but then also I said, why am I here and what am I doing here and who am I and what? And then when I started studying a little bit Lusato, I was studying Lusato.
Right. Mexicano, Lusato.
Yes.
Ramchal. Yeah.
Ramchal, for
Right.
many, many years.
Right.
And finally I came to realize that I was connected to Adam Horitian.
Right.
I didn't see myself. I saw myself floating, and I've seen that I'm connected to Adam, to Avraham, and to the golden calf, and so on and
The
so forth.
generation of the golden calf.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm,
Not to the golden calf. Yeah.
Yeah, no, the
Yeah.
generation, yes,
Right.
and the tragedy of the golden calf.
Well, according to most Rabbanim, who are very big today, and there's a small group, it's not a big group, but we're considered today to be the Gilgal of the generation of the Dar HaMidbar, of the people who are in the Midbar. And which is good, because we travel backwards. The Gilgalim travel backwards. So what's the generation before the Dar HaMidbar is the generation that was Matan Torah. So it's pretty good. You know, it's at some point it's Matan Torah. We were almost there. We're going backwards in time. So, but I understand the background was not taught. This is a mistake. This was a very big mistake, and we should not make that mistake today.
And
In some ways, we're making that mistake
They're
today.
making it. That's why I love that school, Shalheves, that Sorele is going to.
Right.
And
Shalsheles. Yeah.
Shal- and
Right.
I love the Kiddush schools. That's how they should teach. And we were not taught like that, and our children are not taught like that.
I always go back to that. That's what Rabbi Avigdor Miller taught. And
I agree with you 100%.
yeah, that is what he taught, and there's no reason why that should be revolutionary, but it is revolutionary because it's not taught. You know, what is Hashem why to have a moon, and that's something that I'm going to bring up in my radio shows in the future, but I can't when I do too much of this heavy stuff.
you can't.
That tunes out. We got to do a little bit at a time. So, but anyways, it's an amazing thing. I guess later on what we're going to do is we'll have another conversation. We'll talk about wigs, but it's enough to mention over here that Claire AccuHair, you're listening to the person who founded Claire AccuHair, and it happens to be the best wigs in the world. I happen to know a bit about wigs because my wife is a Sheikh Malaka, and if you know something, you know that this is the best place. So we'll talk about that more too, but that's important, you know.
It's a lot to making a wig, a lot more than you can think.
It's a lot more than just sending it out to some China person.
Right.
And usually if you just send it to some Chinese, you know, you're going to end up with Chinese shish kebab, not necessarily a good wig.
Yeah, you know, they have their own designs, whatever, but...
Well, you got to know what you're doing. It's not that simple, you know.
I went to China myself to teach them how to do my wigs.
Right.
And they said to me, nobody was ever so particular like me.
That's...
And they don't finish it for me. I just designed one that's only 3/4 finished in China.
Right.
And I finished the front and the top here in America. So I save all the labor, and yet you get the same quality.
Right. Well, that's because the finish is the most important of the part of the wig. For those of people who are watching this on video, which there's some people on YouTube, you are looking at a wig. I know it doesn't look like that, but you are looking at a wig. We don't have to. We don't want to turn this show into Fright Night, but this is a very good wig. Okay. It is a wig, and it's a top quality wig that if you really look close enough at it, it looks like the hair is coming out of the scalp even. It's not, that's how good it is. And that's really something unusual. We'll make a special thing on that to show that also. But anyways, thank you very much. And
It was my pleasure. I hope I didn't bore anybody.
no, this is going to get a lot of views. A lot of people are going to want to see it. It's an important thing. We're going to put this up on YouTube. We'll cut it a little bit. We'll cut out a couple of uhs and ums. But other than that, we'll leave it complete on YouTube. And also, we'll use it on the radio show, too. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. It was my pleasure.